Next item, VHI Comprehensive Long Range Planning. Kevin Arata isn't here yet. He's not going to be here for a little while yet. And so I'd like to slide him in when he does show up. I'll talk to it for just a little while. I know you've all been briefed, went through it. There's a couple of outcomes that we have coming up. One, our presentation is scheduled for the 16th. Is that right? Okay. Nothing happens on this island without blowback. I expect blowback. People are going to read this a lot of different ways. I think it's important to understand the intent. And there is, the direction, we've always been over the years complaining about, uncontrolled growth on this island, or worried about uncontrolled growth. And I think this master plan, the intent was really just to make it very clear what the character is that we're trying to get to, what that means in terms of the density that is possible on the island, and to try and wrap our hands around that. It's one thing that's going to be, I anticipate is going to be a question is dictation versus suggestion, or, people are going to say, you're telling us what to do. I mean, I just had that conversation during lunch with one of our developers. And that has never been the intent. The intent is, this is the guidelines that we want you to work with it. And this is where we're trying to get to. And there's a lot of options, a lot of permutations of this that can get you where you want to go and have us still protect the community. One of the concerns, one of the reasons why we're doing this, and I'm preaching to, the crowd, my own congregation here, it's like, there's going to be build out effects on everything on this island. Infrastructure, parking, trees, the vegetation on this island, everything's going to be affected. And so I think to be planning now for it is critical. Some things that we have already discovered is that the plan is not going to be done when it's done. And I'm saying that in terms of there's studies that are being identified now that, boy, we need to do this too. I mean, there's a transportation study that really needs to be done on this island. We need to rewrite our zoning ordinances. Rewrite some of them, redo some of them. There's issues that we do need to be a little dictatorial. There are needs, public service needs in terms of public bathrooms and parking that, it has to happen. People don't want toilets near their house. They're going to be somewhere. So we're going to have to talk about that. And there's projects that, the village hall is a key one. We have a plan, but it hasn't happened yet. I can't imagine any growth on this island not affecting where we end up. I wonder whether that design right now stands up, and whether we have to look at different things that we're doing, and how much, we have to rethink things. Haven't gotten to talk to anybody since you've had your meetings, but impact on you guys when you're being presented?
One of my concerns is we're talking about public restrooms, and now we're talking about bathhouses. I mean, showers and changing areas and all.
Yeah.
That's put in the design, and I think that's a little over the top. Also, the only one planned is at East Beach, near the Shoals Club. So it takes all the day traffic and flows all of it to one location. And I think that's not a great idea.
So for the marina area, there was a lot of discussion. I just think that's got to have some more fleshing out, because in terms of where you would pick up luggage and where you would park, that's just not, it's not there yet.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Well, I think it's important to notice none of it's there yet.
Right, well, right.
This is like this is a blush, hey, these are, as you look at these different areas, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, we're introducing a toilet here. well, you know what? You have your condition that, is this best place for it? Does it belong there at all? What aggravation are we introducing by introducing it there? And so I think all those questions are kind of the next step.
Well, I mean, I thought that's kind of what we were supposed to, like, give our, where we think next steps are. That's, I think, one of the next steps in my mind, although our hands are a little bit tied because that's not our property by the marina.
Yeah, that's why we got lawyers, right? Will's gonna step in and
Charles just announced his retirement.
there is, there's dictation of what we can do and what we can't do, and that has to be made really clear. And when we're talking about, some things are going to be in our purview because it's essential to our community. And so,
I think Emily touched on the ferry issue, like they don't want to have carts around the trams. I get that. But I drive my cart and I get on the ferry and I do some shopping and now I'm gonna carry my tubs, my coolers, all the way across. That's a lot.
yeah, I think, yeah, and I this is one of the toughest things that people are gonna have to deal with. And we're looking at it, how we live our life right now. And the plan that we're looking at is, hey, in the next 20 years, there's gonna be, half again as many people at least. And the way we do things right today, it's probably not the way we're gonna be doing it. And
No,
that.
and I get that completely, but I'm just saying it's not what I saw was we got to do some more work on that because
Yeah.
it's even, there's just, pretend we had twice as many people, that plan won't work either. So.
No, it won't. And it won't make.
And I'm
any
not
sense.
expecting them to come up with a solution, but it's, just our response to.
The survey was particularly interesting because, there's huge demand for restaurants. That was, I think, the tallest spike. That's seasonal and restaurants typically will fail. So the market conditions are going to really determine whether we get more restaurants or not, fewer restaurants.
Yeah, somebody said to me, it's not that we need more restaurants, we just need them to stay open. But and there's some truth in that, but they do that based on the market and what the market will bear and if they can make any money or not.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm kind of excited about this thing, obviously, because I think what it's going to generate is an awareness of some of the conditions that probably need to change. I mean, I watch, people going to the club, staff going to the club and so I mean, I've picked people up and taken them to club and they try and figure out how to get their staff there. And obviously parts of the system don't work right now. And I think what this plan does is makes it clear. It's like, hey, here's a solution. It's like, oh, no, that's not the solution. But you really clearly identified the problem. And that's what I think is important.
Yeah, I thought it was an excellent step. It's
Yeah.
not the final plan.
Right.
If we did not take that first step, it would be helter skelter. You would not know what it's going to look like 10 years from now. So yes, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The details need to be flushed out, but you have to start with somewhere or what you're going to get is going to be bad. So it's an excellent start.
Yeah, so during lunch, I was on the phone with our developer right here.
Oh,
This
yes,
building.
yes.
And it was, I personally get along with Chad. I was listening to him. I was like, who am I talking to? It's like, and there's intent by limited and it's well intended, hey, I'm trying to protect you guys. I'm going to be, selling property only to people that are going to survive and we're looking out for you. And all that's important. I think this plan is kind of along the lines, that's great today. Are you guys gonna be around next week? I know you don't plan to be around here forever. And so we need to pick up the reins, and I think that's what this is all about.
The one thing I would caution us for, because I've seen it on zoning or whatever votes we've taken so far, the loudest voices get their way.
Yeah.
And the loudest voices will show up at this meeting. And it doesn't matter in Vision 2025, like you said, the vote of 1,000 people said, we want this. They don't come to this meeting. 10 people come to this meeting and complain. and it affects us.
Yeah.
We have to think of the larger group and not the loudest voice.
The question is, the larger group, are they quiet because they don't care? Or are they quiet because they think they're on the right track?
I'm talking about when I say the largest group, I'm saying the ones who cared enough to do the votes. So we could look at the graphs and we could look at what they say they wanted, and we could see 600 people wanted this. We have to weigh that versus 10 people who come to the meeting and say they don't want this.
That's fair.
Well, and you have to look at all these surveys too. So there's a lot of people said they wanted restaurants. And then you have all these people we hear from that want to slow down development. So,
Yep.
Yeah, no, I know.
you know,
Well,
it's a matter of,
my recollection is that the survey was only completed by a few hundred people. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's my recollection.
So,
When was the 2020 plan done, Carrie? The 2020, whatever, the 2025 plan, when was that done? Yeah, so since then, Horizons has added 200 seats.
Yeah.
And Jailhouse Provisions has opened up. Now, it's affected Delphinus for sure, but seating has been added. Is it enough? I mean, who knows yet, but just, and again, back to Jerry's point, what Brian and his team have put together is the first shot out of the cannon. And we're never going, this council is never going to come up with the final plan.
No.
The council after us is going to come up with the final plan. The council after that's not going to come up with the final. All this is conceptually, directionally, here's where we think it makes sense at this point in time for this island to fill out its commercial space. But things are going to happen. Regulations may change. Council's going to change. It's going to evolve, but we got to start somewhere. And that's why I agree with you. Putting all the day trippers in one spot doesn't make sense. We got to fix that. I agree with that. And I agree with you. I struggled when Brian first talked about separating the trams and the day trip traffic. Conceptual, I kind of like that. Maybe you can help it safety wise, but that does need more work. But
Yeah.
but we know that because it's a complicated place. And I thought it was helpful to really be able to visualize the commercial properties availability, what was a potential there, those kind of things. I mean, I think it was a good, I wasn't
think the
being critical
walkway
of the
design
project.
to get to the lighthouse area
all good.
was very good.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the retail on first floor and some residential second floor, but not real tall buildings, not massive structures. That was good. I think that kind of vision would sell well here.
Yeah,
The 50,000 foot level is, you don't know what we would have if you don't start somewhere and start planning for it. Who knows what we would end up with?
I do think the transportation piece is a critical piece to look at this, because moving around the island is,
The traffic and road study? Yeah. Is that what you're talking about?
I know, yes, and I think that, so,
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, but bigger than that. It's like, what are options? I mean, how are we going to move people around this island?
Well, when I've done it,
Yep.
corporate world, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
What you just said is exactly what a lot of it is about. It's not just
Yeah.
widening roads, it's
Yeah.
what's the population going to be, what the density spots are going to be, and how do you move traffic in and out of all that. So I'm calling it that type of
Okay.
study because that's the buzzword, but you're right with what you're saying, what has to be done.
it's fascinating too, and talking to Brian in the very beginning, it was bathrooms. As an architect, whenever you're doing a commercial building, somewhere along the line, you're like, okay, where's the elevator and where's the toilets? The rest is offices. We can figure those out, but this is the core. And I think that in going through this plan with Brian, it's like, where are we parking? Everything came back to where are we parking? You can throw all these, little green fuzzy things, and a couple of buildings here or there, but the question always came down to how you move them around, where they park their cars. And so, yeah,
We're just getting around to fixing things a bit in the harbor. But we start changing it all around again, it's gonna be messy.
yeah. So that's kind of where we are. When Kevin comes in, I'd like him to just talk a couple minutes about how the committee's working. And
I had in my notes that the meeting is on the 15th in the afternoon at 3 o'clock. Has it been changed?
Yeah, I think originally they couldn't get everybody together on the 15th, so it's the 16th from 10 a.m. till 12.
16th, 10 to 12. Okay.
Can you talk about design guidelines?
yeah, so design guidelines, I've been working on the design guidelines and, you know, 2/3 of the way, maybe a little bit more through the first draft. And I've talked to Kevin to read them after I get done with them, and I think we need to push them around a little bit, make sure, see what's there or not there. I got design guidelines from the association of their residential guidelines, and I got limiteds, design, commercial design guidelines. And there's you know, bits and pieces of both of them all make sense for us. And I'm incorporating them into one whole right now. One of the big questions will be, you develop design guidelines, who's enforcing them?
Well, right, of course.
And that's a discussion that we kind of need to have. This is, you know, it's commercial property and who, you know. I think it's a little bit different than, you know, reviewing residential guidelines. 'Cause there's
Right.
familiarity that everybody has with a house on this island. But once you get into a scale that's a little bit larger, I think we need to have more critical look at who's going to be.
And I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but I'm thinking of this in terms of the moratorium we placed and why we said we were doing that and how we need to
Yeah, I think that.
move forward because it ends in
that-
March.
I'm gonna have Kevin address that a little bit, because I know that group was talking about the moratorium and when it should end and what we should do about it, and they're gonna be making a recommendation to us.
Okay.
I know that Kevin and I both talked about the guidelines and dovetailing them with the master plan. So if there's an area on the master plan that says, this is the kind of type of building, well, some of the guidelines describe what that means in terms of building, in terms, well, can't be more than 45 feet tall, it has to have at least this kind of slope on its roof. Kind of thing. So we're gonna try and dovetail the two so that we don't have contradictions right on.
We just need to tie that back into our original moratorium, right?
Yeah, the current moratorium is set to end March 17th, which was intentional to correspond with your March meeting in the event there was a need for an extension. This was sort of anticipated as a potential part of what was coming out of, or what would come out of the camp committee. And Darcy and I have talked about, you know, notice for that. But it would likely be helpful to give some direction, probably tomorrow, about whether you think that we should go ahead and put notice out to consider extending the moratorium.
And so, will remind me, when did we first set this? Because March was an extension of our original, right?
March to then end in June, and then we reconsidered it in June to come through to this. Or was that, it was a new,
It started in last June, right?
I remember, I think we started sooner than that.
Okay,
We had a special meeting in the summer to extend it.
right. So we're coming up on a year.
Which I'll say is not uncommon. Chris and I have talked about, you know, a somewhat similar example that was the Village of Pinehurst went through a process very similar to this. And, you know, they ended up with almost a 2-year moratorium after doing a study and then realizing they needed to do more work.
One little thing that ordinances. You know, there's always been an issue when you're on the ARC. If the association house comes up and the question is, you know, the village has ordinances that say this. And the association has guidelines that say that, and they don't always directly coincide. And I think it's time that we should consolidate these things and make sure that we're not contradicting each other and those things are being addressed.
Is it being addressed already now?
No,
or
they need to be addressed. You know, there's lighting concerns that, you know, the dark sky policy that we're real strict about with houses. And then you turn the corner and it's like, wow. So it's kind of, not that we have to have dark buildings everywhere, but I think that we should be looking at what we're doing. That's all I have. Come on up and take a seat for a minute.
Get in the fire. car.
So we went through the master plan and I got my impression of what we were doing and got feedback from the council, what, you know, they each had their session. And I just wanted to give you a chance to talk for, you know, just tell us how your board is doing and
Okay,
kind of thing.
so just a quick recap. Thank you all for giving me an opportunity to speak. I met with Chris and Will yesterday to talk through some of what I will share on the 16th of February, but just as a quick recap. So the 9th of November is when we formed from you all and appointing us to the CAMC committee. Did our walkabout on the 5th of December. And then various times, as the mayor just said, we've met with each of you in smaller groups to talk about the results of the walkabout and other things that have come up, just to make sure that it's going in the right direction. I've done the same thing from the committee side, so each of the committee members has seen the same thing you have. In fact, one of them was actually on it. Diane Reed was on it with us to hear about what's going to be presented on the 16th. And then on the 27th, which was 2 weeks ago-ish now, on a Friday, we met for about 2.5 hours. All of the committee members met, all of us in person. Diane Reed is the alternate, and then the rest of the primaries, and then Nathan on the telephone to listen in. So what we went over was, what did we see on the walkabout? Did we incorporate all the things we've talked about on the walkabout? And what other things we felt from reviewing the survey and from reviewing BHI's guidelines? And then Carrie's still in here, so I'll just shout out to her, reviewing the BHA's guidelines that they've come up with that I think the mayor has seen as well, to talk about what kinds of things could be encompassed in what Chris aptly termed a technical review process yesterday when we met. So the plan on the 16th of February is to come together in a public setting. Brian will present with his team what's going to happen. I'll do a short opening. Brian will present the team and what they've come up with, what you all have seen already. So that part will be broadcast to the public. I'll come up with some comments on the end that the collective committee has agreed upon that I again shared with Chris and Will yesterday, and I'm fine tuning them now based on our pretty good or pretty lengthy meeting yesterday, but had a lot of great points to add into it. And so the primary attack on that particular statement that I make will be, one, what are the things that Brian's team can consider in terms of things to change? I'll be honest, there's not a lot because they've really put a lot of thought into what's happened. We've talked a lot about the input from you all and from the committee itself. And so there's a few things in there. We'll talk about the survey. And again, to Chris's point yesterday, mentioning the collection of what we've done here and its similarity to Vision 2025. There's a lot of similarities in terms of what was done for that gathering. Chris, when did you say that was? In 2017, I think? 18, 17 or 18. So fast forwarding to where we're at now, the collection of things that have come in from the survey. I think the survey that you all did here and what Brian's team did has a lot more depth to it. Because it was much more pointed in its desires and seeking the outcomes that it did. So we'll talk about that. And then I've got a bunch of suggestions in the end that are really just council directed. Here's some things to consider. I'll just throw two of them out there because I heard them mentioned in here as I was sitting here for the last little bit of time. Public bathrooms, not on the CAMC radar at all, but it's a huge thing that came out in the surveys. And then as the Conservancy mentioned, what do you do from a preservation of land perspective? And Chris and Will and I talked about that yesterday. Not on the big picture CAMC necessarily, but there are only limited lots left here. So how do we attack that as a village? And how do you go out and help do that where it makes sense to take a piece of property, however that's funded, and dedicate that as village land, public space. And then the third one that I'll mention, then I'll stop so I don't give everything away, is Parks and Recreation. How do we look ahead from a Parks and Rec perspective? Do we consider a Parks and Rec department at some point, whether that's one person or two, and how is that funded? And what can you do from a grants perspective? But to manage those things that happen when we've got restricted abilities from a conservative or from a club side for people to come play, and all the rest of the folks are left with nothing. What do we do in the amphitheater area? What do we do in the green space down in Cape Fear Station? And so how do you manage that? So that's what we're looking to do. Of course, council is invited to that. We've invited each of the entities that were up here speaking today, or they will be invited, as Darcy and I have talked about. And then the public is invited. And at the end of all of that stuff, we will allow for a public comment period. 3 minutes per individual to come in here and speak. They don't have to sign up in advance. They can listen to everything that's presented. They can stand up and speak their piece. That becomes, again, more input that we can get as a committee. If you're here from a council side, you can hear as well. And then finally, David Ray has been asked to invite the planning board. So whoever from that board can come as well on the 16th, that'll happen as well. That's, I believe, from 10 to 12 we're talking about
In here.
in here. And Darcy and I are working to set the agenda sometime this week, so that can be properly noticed.
Kevin, that work was fabulous and people are going to be interested in it, but I'm not going to be the only person gone on February 16th. And people might not even hear about it, know about it for a month or 2 or 3. Is it going to be taped and left on a website so that people can watch it?
Good question.
Or
Recording this now, we'll share this now.
Yep.
So.
what about, is it available by Zoom?
Yes, ma'am. That's a great question. And yes, it will be. It'll be zoomed in. They can't ask questions that way. We're not going to do feedback piece, but they can absolutely listen in. So it will be zoomed. And
That would be helpful.
They chat and ask a question.
That's a hard management issue.
Okay.
It's hard.
Fair enough, fair enough. So basically they should write in to you or to Kevin or somebody. If you have a question, concern, input, send it here.
Yeah, actually have my email set up to.
Good.
Send something to the entire committee, so.
Just during the meeting or as people think about it, month after, a week after, whatever?
What Chris and I talked about yesterday, particularly, I think, as it relates to your question, sir, was in lieu of a public comment, if you can't be here to give that in person, then they could send it in until I think you said 5 o'clock. the day before.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and put it in the notices 5 PM the day before.
So they've still got an ability to write whatever input they want to formally create.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't asking about a question to be answered at that meeting. I was talking about for the feedback loop for people who either hear it or watch it on tape a month later.
Oh.
Later.
Then
Any feedback loop coming to the, is there something set up for that?
No, but we can certainly figure something out.
Only if you think it's appropriate. I'm raising it as a.
Yeah,
question.
no, I think it would
deadline.
be.
It needs to have a deadline,
Yeah.
Yeah. but we've got the Camp C webpage on our village website that we could steer them to with a copy of the presentation on the 16th with that, oh, by the way, if you want to, after listening to this, you have comments or feedback, email it to this by such and such date.
And it works best when those village newsletters, you just have the link to go to it versus someone searching through the village website. Those links are just, that's great to do it that way.
I'm real excited.
It worked.
I mean, you guys are doing good work.
All right, well, thank you all.
Thanks.
Okay.